Hello again, I am Lucky and I am pursuing my integrated MBA in data science and artificial intelligence from IIT Mandi. And I am recording these videos just for the sake of consistency, improving my communication, and gaining knowledge. So, from continuing to the last videos, I was on the first unit and first chapter. If you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive. And by the way, the book is How to Win Friends and Influence People. Yes, this one. How to Win Friends and Influence People. So, continuing from tomorrow, Lincoln replied, don't criticize them. They are just what we would be under similar circumstances. Yet, if any men ever had occasion to criticize, surely it was Lincoln. Let's take just one illustration. The Battle of Gettysburg was fought during the first 3 days of July 1863. During the night of 4 July, Lee began to retreat southwards while storm clouds debugged the country with rain. When Lee reached the Potomac with his defeated army, he found a swollen, impassable river in front of him and a victorious Union army behind him. Lee was in trap. He couldn't escape. Lincoln saw that. Here was a golden heaven sent opportunity, the opportunity to capture Lee's army and end the war immediately. So, with a surge of high hope, Lincoln ordered Meade not to call a council of war but to attack Lee immediately. Lincoln telegraphed his order and then sent a special messenger to Meade demanding immediate action. And what did General Meade do? He did the very opposite of what he was told to do. He called a council of war in direct violation of Lincoln's order. He hesitated, he procrastinated, he telegraphed all manners of excuses, he refused point blank to attack Lee. Finally, the waters receded and Lee escaped over the Potomac with his force. Lincoln was furious. What does this mean? Lincoln cried to his son Robert. Great God, what does this mean? We had them within our grasp and had only to stretch forth our hands, and they were ours. Yet nothing that I could say or do could make the army move. Under the circumstances, almost any general could have defeated Lee. If I had gone up there, could have whipped him myself. In bitter disappointment, Lincoln sat down and wrote Meade this letter. And remember, at this period of life, Lincoln was extremely conservative and restrained in his phraseology. So, this letter coming from Lincoln in 1863 was tantamount to the severest rebuke. My dear General, I do not believe you appreciate the magnitude of misfortune involved in Lee's escape. He was within our easy grasp, and to have closed upon him would, in connection with our other late success, have ended the war. As it is, the war will be prolonged indefinitely. If you could not safely attack Lee last Monday, how can you possibly do so south of the river? When you can take with you very few, no more than two-thirds of force, you then had in hand. It would be unreasonable to expect, and I do not expect that you can now effect much. Your golden opportunity is gone, and I am distressed immeasurably because of it. What do you suppose Meade did when he read the letter? Meade never saw the letter. Lincoln never mailed it. It was found among the paper after his death. My guess is, and this is only a guess, that after writing the letter, Lincoln looked out of the window and said to himself, "Just a minute. Maybe I ought not to be so hasty. It is easy enough for me to sit here in the quiet of White House and order Meade to attack. But if I had been at Gettysburg, and if I had seen so much blood as Meade had seen during the last week, and if my ears had been pierced with the screams and shrieks of wounded and dying, maybe I wouldn't be so anxious to attack either. If I had Meade's timid temperament, perhaps I would have done just what he had done. Anyhow, it is water under the bridge now. If I send this letter, it will relieve my feelings, but it will make Meade try to justify himself. It will make him condemn me. It will arouse hard feelings, impair all his further usefulness as a commander, and perhaps forced him to resign from the army. So, as I have already said, Lincoln put the letter aside, for he had learned by bitter experience that sharp criticism and rebukes almost invariably end in futility. Theodore Roosevelt said that when he, as a president, was confronted with a perplexing problem, he used to lean back and look up at large painting of Lincoln, which is hung above his desk in White House, and ask himself, what would Lincoln do if he were in my shoes? How would he solve the problem? Okay, the next time we are tempted to admonish somebody, let's pull a $5 bill out of our pocket, look at Lincoln's picture on the bill, and ask, how would Lincoln handle this problem if he had it? Mark Twain lost his temper occasionally and wrote letters that turned the paper brown. For example, he once wrote to a man who had aroused the ire, the thing for you is a burial permit. You have only to speak, and I'll see that you get it. Another occasion, he wrote to an editor about a proofreader's attempt to improve my spelling and punctuation. He ordered, set the matter accordingly and according to my copy hereafter, and see that the proofreader retains his suggestions in the mush of decayed brain. The writing of stinging letters made Mark Twain feel better. They allowed him to blow off steam, and the letters didn't do any real harm because Mark's wife secretly lifted them out of the mail and they were never sent. Do you know someone who would like to change and regulate and improve? Good, that is fine. I'm all in favor of it. But why not begin on yourself? From a purely selfish standpoint, that is a lot more profitable than trying to improve others. Yes, and a lot less dangerous. Don't complain about the snow on your neighbor's roof and said Confucius, when your own doorstep is unclean. Okay, when I was still young and trying hard to impress people, I wrote a foolish letter to Richard Harding Davis, an author who once loomed large on the literary horizon of America. I was preparing a magazine article about authors, and I asked Davis to tell me about his method of work. A few weeks earlier, I had received a letter from someone with his notation at the bottom, dictated but not read. I was quite impressed. I felt that the writer must be very big and busy and important. I wasn't the slightest bit busy, but I was eager to make an impression on Harding Davis. So I ended my short note with the words, dictated but not read. He never troubled to answer the letter. He simply returned it to me with the scribble across the bottom, your bad manners are exceeded only by your bad manners. True, I had blundered and perhaps I deserved this rebuke. But being human, I resented it. I resented it so sharply that when I read of the death of Richard Dowing Harris 10 years later, the one thought that still persisted in my mind, I am ashamed to admit, was the hurt he had given me. If you and I want to stir up a resentment tomorrow, that may rankle across the decades and endure until death. Just let us indulge in a little stinging criticism, no matter how certain we are that is just justified. That is justified. When dealing with people, let us remember we are not dealing with creatures of logic. We are dealing with creatures of emotion, creatures of bristling with prejudice and motivated by pride and vanity. Bitter criticism caused the sensitive Thomas Hardy, one of the finest novelists ever to enrich English literature, to give up forever the writing of fiction. Criticism drove Thomas Cartenon, the English poet, to suicide. Benjamin Franklin, tactless in his youth, became so diplomatic, so adroit at handling people that he was made American ambassador to France. The secret of his success, I'll speak ill of no man, he said, and speak all the good I know of everybody. Okay, so one important point is Speak ill for no one, and speak all good that you know about the person. Any fool can criticize, condemn, and complain, and most fools do. But it takes character and self control to be understanding and forgiving. Okay, any fool can criticize, condemn, and complain, and most of the fools do the same. But it takes character and self control to be understanding and forgiving. A great man shows his greatness, said Carlyle, by the way he treats little men. Okay, another important line. A great man shows his greatness by the way he treats little men. Bob Hoover, a famous test pilot and frequent performer at air shows, was returning to his home in Los Angeles from an air show in San Diego, as described in the magazine Flight Operations. At 300 feet in the air, both engines suddenly stopped. By deft maneuvering, he managed to land the plane, but it was badly damaged, although nobody was hurt. Hoover's first act after the emergency landing was to inspect the airplane's fuel. Just as he suspected, the World War II propelled plane had been filled with jet fuel rather than gasoline. Upon returning to the airport, he asked to see the mechanic who had serviced his plane. The young man was sick, and with the agony of his mistake, tears streamed down his face, and Hoover approached. He had just caused the loss of very expensive plane and could have caused the loss of three lives as well. You can imagine Hoover's anger. One could anticipate his tongue lashing that this proud and precise pilot would unleash for the carelessness, but Hoover didn't scold the mechanic. He didn't even criticize him. Instead, he put his big arms around the man's shoulder and said, "To show you I'm here that you will never do this again, I want you to service my F 51 tomorrow." Often parents are tempted to criticize their children. You'd expect me to say don't, but I'll not. I'm merely going to say okay. Often parents are tempted to criticize their children. Yes. You would expect me to say don't, but I'll not. I'm merely going to say before you criticize them, read one of the classics of American journalism, Father Forgets. It originally appeared as an editor in People's Home Journal. We are reprinting it here with the author's permission, as condensed in Reader's Digest. Father Forgets is one of the those little pieces which dashed off in a moment of sincere feeling strikes an echoing chord in so many readers as to become a perennial reprint favorite. Since its first appearance, Father Forgets has been reproduced, writes the author W. Livingston learned, learned in hundreds of magazines and house organs, and in newspapers the country over. It has been reprinted almost extensively in many foreign languages. I have given personal permission to thousands who wish to read it from school, church, and lecture platforms. It has been on the air on countless occasions and programs. Oddly enough, college periodicals have used it, and high school magazines. Sometimes a little piece seemed mysteriously to click. That one certainly did. Okay, I'm losing my focus in between. I need to focus and finish it. It's only 2.5 pages that is left for the first chapter to be finished. Father Focused, W. Livingston learned. Listen, son, I'm saying this as you lie asleep. One little paw crumbled under your cheek, and the blonde curls stickingly wet on your damp forehead. I have stolen into your room alone. Just a few minutes ago, as I sat reading my paper in the library, a stifling wave of remorse swept over me. Guiltily, I came to your bedside. There are the things I was thinking. Son, I had been cross to you. I scolded you as you were dressing for school because you gave your face merely a dab with a towel. I took you to task for not cleaning your shoes. I called out angrily when you threw some of your things on floor. At breakfast, I found fault too. You spilled things. You gulped down your food. You put your elbows on table. You spread butter too thick on your bread. And as you started off to play, and I made for my train, you turned and waved a hand and called goodbye, Daddy. And I frowned and said in reply, hold your shoulders back. Then it began all over again in late afternoon. As I came up the road, I spelled you down on your knees playing marbles. There were holes in your stockings. I humiliated you before your boyfriends by marching you ahead of me to the house. The stockings were expensive, and if you had to buy them, you would be more careful. Imagine that, son, from a father. Do you remember later, when I was reading in the library, how you came intimately with a sort of hurt look in your eyes? When I glanced up over my paper, impatient and interruption at the interruption, impatient at the interruption, you hesitated at the door. What is it you want? I snapped. You said nothing, but ran across in one tempestuous plunge and threw your arms around my neck and kissed me, and your small arms tightened with an affection that God has set blooming in your heart and which even neglected could not wither. And then you were gone, fluttering up the stairs. Well, son, it was shortly after that my paper slipped off my hands and terrible sickness came, sickening fear came over me. What has habit been doing to me? The habit of finding fault, of reprimanding. This was my reward to you for being a boy. It was not that I did not love you, it was that I expected too much of youth. I was measuring you by yardstick of my own years, and there was so much that was good and fine and true in your character. The little hurt of you was as big as the dawn itself over the white hills, over the wide hills. This was shown by your spontaneous impulse to rush in and kiss me good night. Nothing else matters tonight, son. I have come to your bedside in the darkness, and I have knelt there ashamed. It is a feeble atonement. I know you would not understand these things if I told you them during your waking hours, but tomorrow I'll be a real daddy. I'll chum with you and suffer when you suffer and laugh when you laugh. I'll bite my tongue when impatient words come, and I'll keep saying as if it were a ritual, he's nothing but a boy, a little boy. I'm afraid I have visualized you as a man. Yet, as I see you now, son, crumpled and weary in your coat, I see that you are still a baby. Yesterday you were in your mother's arm, your head on your shoulders, your head on her shoulders. I have asked too much, too much. Instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. Okay, it's important. Instead of criticizing them or saying something to them in angrily, just let us try to figure out why they are doing what they are doing. That's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism, and it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. To know all is to forgive all. To know all is to forgive all. As Dr. Johnson said, God Himself, sir, does not propose to judge men until the end of His days. Why should you and I? Okay, another good line. God Himself does not propose to judge men until the end of His days. Why should you and I? And here is principle one: don't criticize but condemn. Oh, I'm sorry. Here is principle one: don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Instead, Try to understand the person, try to understand why he's doing what he's doing. So, with this, with this, with this, we have completed our first part and first chapter. That was, if you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive. That was all for today. Good night. Jai Hind.